Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Sarah Smart and Sofia Whelan, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's a real pleasure to be with both of you. Sarah, you're joining us from the DC area. Sofia, you're joining us from Sweden. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking all about how AI and automation are reshaping the way companies think about talent. Of course, we're in the age of technological disruption. AI, of course, is a big part of that. Not the only disruption happening, but a huge disruption that's currently happening. And it's reshaping the way we think about work. It's changing the way we think about talent and skills and what's necessary in jobs, job design, and even whole careers. And that's only going to continue to unfold in the coming months and the coming years. So thinking about talent in compelling ways in response to this disruption, I think is really, really important. As we get started, I wanted to share Sarah's and Sofia's bio with everybody. Sarah Smart has over 20 years of leadership experience in talent acquisition at companies like Hilton Worldwide, Accenture, JPMorgan Chase, and others. During her career, Sarah has led global teams in the adoption of generative AI-enabled technologies and new processes that transform and align organizations to the new expectations in HR. Sofia Whelan brings over 16 years of global HR transformation experience. She has a strong passion and a deep focus on translating HR trends into programs that drive business value. During her time at Deloitte as human capital consultant, she excelled at providing advice and implementation services related to HR technology strategy, operating models, org design, and vendor selections, as well as transformation, executive and change management for a wide range of other companies. Really, both Sarah and Sofia, you both have just tremendous backgrounds. I could go on and on about both of you. I'm going to pause there. Anything you would either like to highlight about your own backgrounds, personal context before we dive on in?
I think we're both just excited to be here, John. Both of us have a lot of experience with how technology has transformed HR organizations. And what does that mean for HR post, technology implementation? How do jobs change? How does the HR organization in the future look? And we firmly believe that we are at the edge of a precipice of dramatic change inside of HR, and that there are companies that are leaning in and embracing it and finding new ways to work. And that there are companies that are, cautiously dipping their toe in, and all stages and phases are welcome. But, where I think we're both really passionate is what changes, how does your work change? And how does the end user experience that change? So that's probably the only thing I'd add for my background.
Yeah, and I would add, I think that we had the opportunity to work together when we were at JPMorgan Chase, and we were able to do some kind of really early adoption of some of the things that the market is talking about right now. And so that was sort of the catalyst for us to go out and start our own company to help other companies across, across industries with their similar journeys, right? So like you said in my intro, passionate about translating trends into, programs that work for HR that create real business outcomes. And that was the opportunity that we had in front of us with HorizonHuman. And that's what we get to do every day now, which is awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. Yeah, and workforce transformation is all the buzz right now, right? And everyone's talking about skills and skills gaps. Everyone's talking about workforce transformation in response to these disruptions, AI and others, any sort of automation, I suppose. And maybe share just as a foundational starting point for this conversation, maybe share your perspectives on really how AI and automation are reshaping how companies are thinking about talent, or maybe it's not quite yet, and maybe it should be, and where companies need to start thinking about talent?
Yeah,
Sophia,
I can
you should take
start.
that first. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can start. And I actually think that my perspective on this is evolving almost daily.
Hmm.
As conversations I'm having with HR leaders or with technology leaders or with industry analysts, whatever it might be, and of course with my clients, um, and I'm starting to come to this realization that HR really has a critical role to play in maintaining the human aspect of work. And so as trust in governments are, record low, as trust in employers are starting to go down because people are reading, especially in the United States, where people are reading all these headlines around AIs, we're not hiring or we're keeping hiring flat or we're reducing hiring and people seeing, other people getting laid off, the recession's looming. People are just losing trust in their organizations also. And I think HR now really has a critical role to play in guiding the workforce, in saying these are the critical human skills that we still need, and these are the critical human jobs that we will still have. And therefore, these are the career paths that I will guide you and help you and guide the workforce and provide opportunities for the workforce to develop and to learn and to upskill and to work in this new environment. And I think that is truly what HR, the best role that HR can play now in
Hmm.
this new world. I think that the AI, yes, it's going to take tasks. Yes, it may take jobs or will or has. And I think that all of this is the future of work. But to me, the future of work for HR really is strategic workforce planning,
Yeah.
understanding, okay, what are the skills that humans are going to keep needing to have, the jobs that humans will keep doing, and what are the skills and jobs that AI will do. And then let's plan together, right, with the business around kind of the human side of things and really continue to help and keep the engagements with the workforce because we do need people. We're still going to continue to need people, right? So then, then comes all the other stuff like hiring the right people, retention and all the other things. But I do think that how I see it today, the role that HR has to play.
Awesome. Yeah. Sarah, anything you want to add to that?
I would say, that Sophia and I are generally aligned. I don't think we've seen the full power of what AI can do. And I think
Mhm.
that right now we're reaching for, hey, can it save companies money? And we see this across the board. CEOs, putting out a mandate of 30% of their jobs will be done by AI. I'm not going to cite specific CEOs, but you know who you are. Um, and I think that's nearsighted and
Yeah.
short-sighted. I think that there's a whole new industry that is being created around jobs in AI. There is a whole new skill set being created in jobs in AI. So just as Sophia said, it's around, workforce planning, workforce strategy, absolutely for HR leaders. It's also for HR leaders to be the voice of reason at the table of saying, okay, great. So you're going to invest, and I see this all the time. You're going to invest $1 million in this one piece of technology to save yourself 17 jobs, but you're still going to need another 20 jobs on the back end actually maintaining that product, or supporting that product, or teaching the large language model, or auditing that large language model if that's something that you're implementing. And so there's a bit of chaos that I think we're seeing right now in the adoption curve, that I don't recall seeing in other big tech changes in my career. And so, as Sophia mentioned, trust is so important. I think moving with deliberate intent as an HR leader right now and feeling, yeah, and making decisions, not just waiting for technology to happen to you, is probably the biggest thing that an HR leader can do.
Yeah, that trust piece is so incredibly vital. I mean, it's important in any aspect of business, but especially, given the current context of declining trust in institutions, across the political and business and social spectrums, uh, given the political turmoil that we see around us, given the complexities and the shifting nature of work and the workforce, everything right now is complicated. And because of that, people are nervous. People, are wired to not like and love change and to seek comfort and stability wherever possible. And so the fact that people are trying to navigate this within their organizations or perhaps, exploring opportunities to go to other organizations, absolutely one of the most human aspects of all of this that has to be at the forefront is establishing and maintaining and sustaining trust within the organization. And HR has always played an important role in that and really should play a very important role in that moving forward as we're reshaping jobs, job redesign, new skill taxonomies, all these different sorts of things, and we just need to over communicate and be transparent, and that will help us to have more trust within our organizations. The problem is, most organizations aren't particularly good at that. They're not particularly good at the trust thing generally, the communication thing more specifically, and given the pace of change right now, like you said, Sarah, many are just kind of waiting to see. Like they know that they want to cut costs, they know that this is a way to do it, but they're also not sure on what the right tools are. So they're kind of in limbo mode, and that means their people are in limbo mode. And anyways, it adds to the fire of
It's chaotic. It's a chaotic environment.
yeah,
It's hard to be an employee right now. I think in environments like that, I think depending on how close you are to the change, it is also particularly hard to be an employee. I think that also HR organizations are grappling with the skills that they had in
right.
HR isn't going to get them to the next phase of transformation from a technology perspective.
Not for most. Yeah.
Obviously you always need strong practitioners who can provide great business advice to their clients. I think that that is very clear. There are other roles that could be partially or fully automated in some way from an AI perspective, but you need a whole new set of skills to support that transformation that does not exist inside of most HR organizations today. The technology capability, the strategy capability, and frankly, the moving the structure away from these COEs to much more of a product operating model is probably the biggest changes that we're seeing from an HR transformation perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was
Can you
going to
say?
say like,
Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was going to say that that's exactly it. Not just like kind of we started out talking about how HR can really support the business through this transformation, right? And how HR can add value. I think exactly to Sarah's point, most HR organizations aren't equipped themselves to sort of handle. We talked about skills at the very top, right? But HR also needs to relook at their own skills to be able to move this transformation forward in a way that makes sense. And we've seen this at companies we've worked at and otherwise that, we're moving to a new way of working with technology. We're putting together teams that look very different, but actually 80% of the skill set that we had was, HR SMEs, if you will, and we only needed maybe 20% of that. So then is HR taking a look at their own, skills map, if you will, to say, okay, what skills do we need for the future? And do we have, a way of investing and creating those skills in our organization?
Yeah, well, let's double click on that, because both of you have mentioned skills several times. I know you refer sometimes to the skills second wind as a concept. Maybe let's unpack that and explore like what is it about the skills that are needed in this current context?
For me, I'm going to let Sarah also answer, but for me, the skill second win is about skills used to be kind of a solution looking for a problem almost.
Mm,
And it could solve a lot of different problems. And clients and organizations struggled with, they're hearing this is a trend, this is something we have to support and do and jump on. But they weren't exactly clear on the strategy of what they actually wanted to achieve with it. I think that organizations now have gotten smarter. And I think that based on what I was saying earlier, what HR can really add value with now is understanding those human skills. I think that's kind of where the skill second win for me, it makes a lot of sense because now you really do have a really big problem in front of you that you could actually potentially solve with kind of looking at a skills-based sort of strategy. And so that's exciting. And I think that we've seen more and more kind of research come out around like companies that do it big, they do it small, but they are moving the needle on creating sort of some of the outcomes that they want to create. And for HR specifically, maybe Sarah, want to talk about that, like what we're seeing in HR in terms of the skills that HR need for the future.
I could talk about that. Sorry, I seem to have my family all talking to me also all at the same time. So if you're seeing like little notifications, somehow they didn't get the memo, and they're the
It
only
did.
ones that can break through any of my blocks. So here we go. Apologies. Um, this is what I'll say about sort of the skills transformation specific to the HR organization. And we're starting to see this, and I reference this a couple of different places. We're starting to see CHROs becoming also the chief AI officers. Now, it depends on the type of company that they're in. So Jackie Canny is probably the most prominent one, who CHRO of ServiceNow and also the chief AI officer for ServiceNow. Um, it's a really nice way of framing the change that's coming through HR, which is, traditionally you have a tremendous amount of administrative and manual work that sits inside of HR. You have systems that don't talk to each other. So the
Yeah.
people are the integrations as opposed to technology being the integrations. We have been struggling with this for the past, let's call it decade, in terms of implementing cloud-based software and trying to
Yep.
make it work and realizing, we missed some steps in that process. Um, and so we built up these HR technology support systems that are, configuration and integrations, and maybe if you're lucky, some engineering. But what you don't have in that tech stack is probably, or that tech stack skill set is probably user experience and user design, which is going to become a critical skill inside of HR. And I believe, has to be at the forefront of almost every single one of these initiatives. And that's not just end user experience, but what kind of experience do you want to drive and create? You need a tremendous amount of, if you're going to invest in AI and HR, you need to rethink the type of data science and data architecture support you have in the HR organization. You also need to really start thinking about compliance and audit and bias checking, because as soon as you introduce AI into HR, you need to do it continuously. It's not a one-time thing. It's not
Hmm.
just because a law said it should be done. The right thing to do is to continuously audit any large language models for any of the things that you are concerned about as an organization, plus everything else that may be legally required from you. And, we're going to start to see that, especially for global companies. We're going to see that push and pull coming through in the EMEA regulations that are coming out, where you're actually going to need to build infrastructure to support that or invest in external products that can help you deliver value. And finally, you're going to need someone sitting at the top who can knit it all together, who can say, okay, great, we've got 20 million priorities. And how do we prioritize the work? And how do we make sure that we're resourced to get this work done? That is typically, in a software engineering context, a product manager.
Hmm.
And, Sophia and I are both moving away from the idea that the CHRO and the CTO should be the same person. We've seen that model proposed. We think it's more of a CHRO who understands technology and has been educated onto the investments that technology requires, and ideally is either moving lockstep with the CTO or has an entire technology organization embedded inside of HR. But it's not going, all of those those roles that are being automated, you're not necessarily going to be able to not replace them. You're going to have to shift that headcount to do different things inside your organization.
Yeah, and you've said a couple times you referred to product development, kind of the PDEV approach to how we handle this. Maybe can you unpack that a little bit more?
Sure. So, I served as product lead for the hire product at JPMorgan Chase, and it was a very, very new role, and it was evolving very much. And the role was to say, okay, great, what are the challenges that need to be solved? Because if you talk to a recruiter, it's really different than talking to a recruiting manager. That's very different than talking to a
Right.
hiring manager. That's very different than talking to a senior executive. So managing through prioritizing all of the initiatives, whether it's business process transformation, which absolutely should sit underneath product, or technology transformation, or a combination, most likely of both. How do you prioritize that work? So in my world, I had different segments. This is potentially not the right way to have it organized, but at the time, I had different segments of work: high volume, specialized, executive, and then I had a couple of different projects. And I also had workforce planning rolling up to me, and workforce analytics rather, and sourcing. And the idea was prioritize the work that's coming across to solve the highest value problems. In a lot of organizations, that's hard to determine,
Right.
because whoever's shouting the loudest or is the senior most person shouting tends to get solved first, but that may not actually be the problem that needs to be solved. And so, for me, I think one of the big things was at JPMorgan Chase, we had a challenge with our product, our primary software product, a cloud-based product that had a significant lag in experience for our recruiters. Offer letters with timeout, spinning wheels for 10 minutes. That doesn't sound like a big problem to our senior executives, but to our everyday users of 2000 plus, that was a serious problem, right? And so my job was to get the resources aligned to the serious problem so that we could then get the throughput to start solving some of the senior level problems. I'm not a technical person. I would not be the person configuring anything ever. But it is about ruthless prioritization and communication, and having all the levers at your disposal.
And one more thing, it's also, I think about, you probably heard the kind of agile HR, but it's about bringing a little bit more of that product thinking into HR with more continuous, quicker sort of implementations of things, trying things out, but really
Right.
continuously having the North Star, right? What is the North Star that you're trying to aim for? What is the outcome you're trying to solve for? And then sort of iteratively work towards it versus maybe HR is traditionally has been a little bit more like has to be perfect before you do anything.
Yeah, the experimentation, the rapid iteration piece that has been adopted in other areas is definitely one of those that I think needs to be adopted. That approach, that mindset, that skill set needs to be adopted within the HR function for sure. Maybe in the few remaining minutes that we have together, we can talk a little bit more about kind of practical implementation. So I think a lot of leaders just feel overwhelmed by, the buzzwords that are out there. Like there's so many hot takes and hot topics, and I think a lot of leaders could probably rattle off, a lot of those buzzwords, but then kind of moving beyond the jargon to actual practical implementation is always tricky. And I think especially in this big unknown that we're currently in, moving towards a skill-based organization in a real practical way is still very elusive to many leaders, to many organizations. Can you speak a little bit to like what are some specific things that anyone who's in the audience today might be able to do to start that process?
Yeah, I mean, moving specifically to a skills-based organization, I'll let Sophia take a bulk of that. But I would say, if you haven't taken the time to have a user-centric design session where you're going through your existing process and identifying your pain points, you're going to start behind any implementation, whether it's skills based or something else. And I don't and that means understanding who's the person who is the glue between the two software systems that doesn't talk to each other, and how many emails do they need to send, because that is the beginning part of understanding, okay, great, what kind of solution do I want to put into place to solve my problem? And then in skills in particular, right, I think everyone gravitates to, oh, skills is going to transform talent acquisition. That seems to be the logical place. What I'll say is it is much harder than that looks. And to actually have that work, the first step you need to do is you need to map your existing skills inside your organization. That is, you can do that through old school job architecture work where you're sending out surveys, or you can use a whole host of new technology that can help you do that. But I think that's a nice segue over to Sophia's expertise.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that actually the most powerful use case, or one of the most powerful use cases I've seen is where HR is using a skills AI tool to solve a specific problem that then while doing that, HR is upskilling in data
Hmm.
understanding, they're upskilling in AI, they're upskilling in analytics. So I think there is sort of you get a twofer there. So one example, which is, we at JPMorgan, I can, talk about this high level. We had done a lot of the skills work for kind of a software engineering population, and we had designed, a learning program for them. But what we didn't do was, what's always with learning is like, how do we measure success? So the use case there is to or kind of measure effectiveness, right, of that learning. So the use case there is actually very small from a skills. You can do so much more with kind of mapping the skills. Ways to measure the effectiveness of learning. Like, are the software engineers upskilling at the rate we think they should be or that we want them to be in the areas that we believe that they need to be upskilling in based on where we're going as a business? So I think that's just a kind of a very small bite of what you can do with skills, but it's also very real and alongside of that, we all learned, right? We all learned things about, how the data is flowing and how, which pieces to put together and, what we can do with the data when it presents. So just, I think just that's a kind of a very interesting and kind of not that complex, really. Everybody wants to figure out, is
Yeah.
my learning actually delivering the value? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sarah and Sophia, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go here in just a minute, but as we start to wrap up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word for today.
Sure. Well, you can find us at on LinkedIn. You can also find us at www.horizonhuman.com. We publish a lot of our work there. We publish on blogs, as well as all of the opportunities to speak to lovely people like yourself, John. We are also pretty active on LinkedIn in terms of sharing information, and I have the privilege of being a member of the Human Centric AI Council, which is giving me a lot of access to some great research and information around the transformation that AI is driving inside of AI, inside of HR. So you can find me there on all those channels, and I'd be delighted to have a chat with anyone.
Yeah, and let me just add, we started Horizon Human because we want to keep the human in HR. And that's sort of our little hashtag that we like to use, which is like hashtag be human. But really, in this world, like we started out at the beginning, lots and lots of change and transformation, and it's hard to, stay anchored. But if you want to just reach out, have a chat, we're very human. We're very happy to chat more
Yeah,
and
you're
share.
not going to get a bot response from us.
Definitely not.
Very good. Sarah, Sophia, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Sarah and Sophia can do for you. Check out their organization and the many great resources that they provide. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.